Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's wonderful to see so many of you here with us at Wesley House, at the Institute, and also quite a good number on online joining us via Zoom. It's wonderful that we can have more of a sort of physical presence for our conferences, for our events, after the two dreaded years that we were struggling to do that because of reasons out of our control. And it's also wonderful to actually have this sort of hybrid, this mixed form of organizing the conference with online participants. My name is Father Dragos. I'm the principal of the Institute here in Cambridge. And as I said, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this summer institute, which wants to address the topic of finding God in the everyday, faith, profession, and vocation. We thought it was a wonderful topic to address because it wants to talk to the reality of our lives as Christians, as Orthodox Christians, if you want. We tend to say that we find God in the church or in prayer or when we meet in holy places or on pilgrimage and so on. But most of our time is spent at work, if you think of a 24-hour day, and then in the family. So we thought, isn't God with us then? But we don't really think about this. It's not something that we try to connect, possibly in an active way, or we don't readily do that. So we thought that this topic is a good topic to address at this Summer Institute. And I'm sort of delighted at the range of speakers that we have for this, and I thank you for your participation. This conference is also dedicated, this event is dedicated to the memory of Christine Mangala Frost. Her picture is up on the screen. Mangala was not only a good and dear friend to many of us, she was also part and parcel of the history of the Institute. She's been teaching, she taught for us, she was a director at some point, and in the last years of her life she was contributing to teaching and some of our conferences as much as she could. Mangala died last year, so we're sort of celebrating a year since her passing to the Lord, and that's the reason why this event is dedicated to her memory, and has been generously sponsored by the Koga family in her memory. And before we get going with the actual proceedings and with the first talk, I'll read a brief text from Mark Frost, her son, in her memory, because many of you knew Mangala, some of you, some of you don't at all. But friends and people who leave a positive mark on our lives as individuals and on our life as a community here at the Institute ought to be remembered. And today is a good day to do that. And I think a fitting way to start our conference. So I'll read what her son Mark sent to us as a memorial. Mark writes, "My mother died on the 7th of November 2020. And on behalf of myself and all of my family, I would like to thank Father Dragos and the Institute for dedicating this event to her memory eternal. I know she would have greatly approved on the theme of this summer's IOCS conference, faith in the everyday life, faith, profession, vocation. But I can't help but wonder whether during her life this was a theme which she spent much time thinking about with regards to herself. Those engaged in a daily courageous battle and test of faith, as she was, are often only graced with occasional moments to reflect. Nor should we presume the hard-working, humble Christian life, even in remote monasteries, is ever a peaceful one, if only. My mother led a very passionate life, full of pain and joy in equal measure. In the Frost family, the frequency with which one followed straight after the other could often be exhausting. But if my mother had lived to take part in this conference, I think she would have had much to say. Certainly, over a lifetime of guiding me, I can recall many times when speaking to her of my own challenges, everyday faith, and the place of humility, forbearance, and fortitude, not to mention endurance within it, became the topic of discussion. My mother's daily commitment to Christ was underscored by a pragmatic attitude to this worldly life that perhaps made her wary of other Christians who express their faith through regular spiritual ecstasies. For her, joy was the reward for hard and painful everyday spiritual work and a glimpse of the eternal. Many times she would say of Pentecostal evangelical gatherings, while not presuming the Spirit to be absent, she would say, "Where are the wounds?" by which she meant the Christian's willingness to carry the wounds of Christ. My mother's own path to Christ was through suffering and an unhappy childhood, where growing up in a devout Hindu family in India, she often felt rejected and unloved. And I'm happy to say that as an adult, having been rejected by her parents for marrying my father and converting to Christianity, she was able to reconcile with her family, and the bond became very close. A bond that was passed on to my sister and I, who came to know and love our Indian grandparents deeply. But as a young girl who was very unhappy, my mother became a devout searcher for the divine presence in the everyday. She often told me that she first came to Christ through her devotions to Krishna, realizing that it was ultimately Christ whom she was yearning for all along. She often styled herself, at least during our intimate conversations about faith, as a Hindu Christian, and would never accept that her previous devotion was wrong, given where it had directed her. Inevitably, both of us came to recognize some of the possibilities of fulfillment theology. And I believe it was this sensibility which enabled her to write so well and authoritatively on comparative faith. She was certainly able to write so well on Hinduism. Privately, we would acknowledge much better than some other academics, because she had lived Hinduism from the inside. She knew the key to understanding it was the power of its daily devotional practices, especially the tradition of bhakti poetry and song, which was the subject of one of her best articles. For my mother, the importance of regular daily devotion and prayer, the work of prayer and the prayer of work, were part of her Hindu upbringing and something she delighted in recovering when she joined the Orthodox Church. For the rest of us, having been raised as Anglicans, it was initially hard not to be bemused by and even mock this new and alien expression of piety. But it was the evening prayers in front of the icons and the lighting of the lamp that moved and won us over, especially when we recognized that much of this devotion was directed to protecting and sustaining ourselves. Like many of us involved in scholarship and academia, my mother faced the inevitable worldly temptations in the striving for recognition, the tendency to seek justification in the Lord through literary glory, the self-deception that theological and liturgical work are a higher calling given to higher Christians, the failure to confront the truth, as the writer in C.S. Lewis's theological dream vision, The Great Divorce, must, that all our works and talents are given by God, entrusted in us by God, and can't be taken with us. We are merely vessels. This is a discussion I came back to regularly with my mother as we both struggled with literary recognition. In the last decades of her life, she fully recognized how her best work as fiction author and scholar was an act of service to others and God. She likened it more than likened it. She equated it in its significance to cooking for others a good meal, something she was very good at. And that's very true. Whereas before she had often railed against all the time she felt was wasted in mundane work looking for after others, when she could have been writing or researching in the library, she became far more at peace with the many ways God called her to serve. My mother's best works, she freely admitted, were written for friends and the Christians and non-Christians she encountered who wanted and needed her to write for them. Her first and best novel, The Firewalkers, which was nominated for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and a finalist for the Deo Gloria Prize, were largely written for her Indian family to explain her faith and her decision to leave. It is a book filled with a love of India and the world where she came from, but at the same time an affirmation of things even greater. Her article on yoga, which has been read many times, was written in response to the everyday concerns of many everyday Christians and others whom she encountered. Her masterful and highly personal book on Hinduism and Orthodox Christianity, The Human Icon, which was published a few years ago, was very much born out of a connection to Indian Orthodoxy and the Syriac Orthodox churches of South India. Once again, it was for her a home-facing book, as my mother saw the future work of Orthodox mission in Asia. My mother would regularly say to me that death is not the worst that can happen on earth. She lived her life with an iron faith, tempered and purified through suffering, sustained by a wonderful openness to love and being loved. When she knew her time was at an end, she was not afraid, but excited and ready to enjoy the heavenly feast. I owe both my parents hugely for my own faith, for guiding me back where I went on my own path without judgment or recrimination, for allowing me to doubt and shoring me up when I did so. But my mother has a special place, as I know she does for so many, for inspiring that faith through both words and ideas, and through the wonderful power of everyday faith. Again, I'd like to thank the Institute for dedicating this summer conference in loving memory, Christine Mangala Frost. Memory eternal.